Sujit, set the table for us by describing briefly what role digital evidence plays for us today, plays for you in your criminal and national security investigations. How crucial is it, and how do you obtain it?
Well, thank you, Ellen, and thank you for having me today. Digital evidence is critical. If you're in the business of trying to enforce a rule of law system, the way that you prove cases in court is through evidence. And the reality is, the world we live in today, everything is digital. Your business records are digital, your phone records are digital, often your communications themselves are digital if you're talking on the phone or via an application. So for us to build cases, we need to have access to electronic evidence and digital evidence. Of course, everything we do is bounded by law. So we want to make sure that we, in law enforcement, when we seek evidence, we're doing it in a lawful way. Part of the difficulties that we're facing now is that the way technology has developed, and obviously technology has incredibly positive benefits. Encryption is something that we are in support of. Mm-hmm. If you're in the business of protecting sensitive information, including government information, you want to make sure it's secure. On the other hand, those very same technologies that protect information also make it increasingly difficult for us to gain access to it, even with court authorization. And I think that's, in a nutshell, encapsulates the going dark problem.
So give us a sense, how severe a problem is it, and about roughly what percentage of your cases pick up, category, criminal, drugs, and what percentage of those cases does encrypted evidence pose a challenge for you?
I think it's difficult to quantify because it really depends on the nature of the case, the type of investigation. What I can tell you is that when it comes to, for example, data in motion, so communications, this is publicly known, many apps are end-to-end encrypted. And so we cannot gain access, even with a court order, to those communications. And so if people are communicating, let's say by FaceTime or by iMessage, even if we go to a judge and fulfill all of the very rigorous requirements to seek a wiretap under federal law, when we go try to serve the order, the companies simply cannot execute because they've designed their systems in a way that doesn't allow the interception. And so that creates tremendous obstacles for us when we've satisfied all the legal obligations.
Right.
To access that evidence.
So is it more than 50% now of your drug cases, would you say? Or
so like I said, it really depends on the nature of the case. What I can say, once WhatsApp went end-to-end encrypted, this is a few years ago, the number of DEA wires fell precipitously. I won't get into specific numbers, but I can tell you that it was a massive drop because DEA investigators, who were often running these wiretap investigations, and for those of you who know, when we're doing transnational organized narcotics cases, you need to be up on wires because that's how the drug dealers typically are communicating, the traffickers. Those numbers fell precipitously once WhatsApp, which is obviously a very popular encrypted app, went end-to-end encrypted. So it's had a material impact on our ability to undertake our investigations.
Well, so let's move into another area where we might actually see the impact of this. This past weekend, the New York Times published a major investigation on child abuse and exploitation online. The report was unequivocal. Online child abuse is rampant with no signs of stopping, and technology both supports and protects abusers. Encryption specifically has been a major roadblock for law enforcement, and in fact, Facebook recently, as you know, announced it was going to put strong encryption, end-to-end encryption on Messenger. So how will that affect your child abuse investigations?
So it will have a tremendous impact. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Alan, because that is one area where we do have statistics and very clear statistics. Last year, around 18 million, more than 18 million tips, cyber tips, were reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So these are essentially tips that the technology providers send to NCMEC, which is a non-governmental organization, showing evidence of child sexual abuse on their platform. So 18 million. I mean, think about that number. If Facebook end-to-end encrypts all of its platforms, including Facebook Messenger and Instagram, which the company has publicly said it will do, the estimation is that millions of those tips will go dark. And so, again, to put flesh on the bone, as I said last year, about 18 million tips. Over 90% of those tips were reported by Facebook, right? So the company actually, under the current status quo, is doing pretty good work in trying to identify child exploitative material that's being traded on this platform.
And it's supposed to report it to this non-governmental organization so that that organization can then
refer it to law enforcement or take appropriate action. So once NCMEC gets the tip, it gives it to state and local law enforcement or to federal law enforcement. We then follow up and try to arrest the individual. The key point here is that of those, as I said, 18 million, over 90% last year were provided by Facebook. If Facebook goes end-to-end encrypted, essentially 75% of those 16 million tips will go dark. So that is a very practical application of how not having visibility into what's happening on these platforms will have a material impact on public safety. And these are children, right? This is child sexual abuse that we're talking about. And as the New York Times article said, this is widespread. You know, the stuff that's happening on the internet now is really pretty scary.